All right, let's get started. Last session for today, so let's do it. So the talk is AI with Drupal, and you've probably been in touch with LLM technologies like ChatGPT and the likes already, so you know it's quite easy to use, but it gets difficult like when you actually want to build something that's useful with it. So that's the topic for today. Quickly about me, I'm Christoph. I'm one of the founders of Onyx Internet, and at Onyx Internet I do a lot of R&D, and that's why I get to touch like these technologies a lot, and I have the chance to drive that. And yeah, if you want to find me on social media on Drupal, it's my last name, how you best find me. Quickly about Onyx Internet. So we are a full-service software company agency, so we do everything from the strategy consulting part to user experience design to the development, and here we just do exclusively Drupal, PHP Symfony, and JavaScript, React, and of course we also operate the website and we optimize and track and do hosting, maintenance, and everything related. So we really provide everything out of one hand. We are a team, we're 85 people in total. We are 10 years old. We have offices in 3 locations. We are in Frankfurt. That's where I'm originally from. We have an office in Iceland, so maybe you caught that my last name is the same last name as from Batti, who spoke this morning. She's Icelandic. That's why we have an office there as well. And we also have a nice team in Spain. And here in Berlin, we also have a team. And like in total, we just like from everywhere, and we speak broken English as in our company. Of course, we're 10 years old. We've done a lot of projects, some well-known brands among them. But for today's presentation, so it's about AI in Drupal and large language model technologies and how you apply this. So the goal so usually, like I don't know, like the experience level, like in this group. Yeah, maybe some of you are very experienced, like using AI technologies. Maybe some of you are just getting in touch with this like rather early. And so what I'm going to try in this presentation, I want to first get everybody on level that we know what we're talking about, like how this works. And then I want to show you what you can just do right now out of the box, what's just possible, what you can turn on. And then, you will automatically understand, like if you want to extend this and you want to build your own, you want to customize it to your needs or your client's needs, how you would go about it. So that's the goal of this presentation. And in the end, I will give some inspiration for some stuff like what we've been doing or what we've been experimenting with to kind of spark like what you could be doing in your projects. So it's built up like this. First, let's do an overview of AI. And the goal here is really that we just on the same page, that you know exactly how this works. And then we just go to demos, show some things. Yeah, the barcode here is for this presentation. It comes again, like every time I show the agenda, the barcode comes again. So if I click too fast for you now, so you'll see it again. And then we'll do some demos. I've prepared some demos for you. Then we'll look at when you build dynamic applications. You'll see what that is when we get there. And in the end, we get to the useful applications. All right. Let's get started. So when I say large language models, I mean AI. Yeah. And so I just use this synonymously for this presentation. And when I mean AI, I mean generative AI. I mean AI that generates something. Yeah. And what a large language model is you stick in some text into the large language model. It processes the text that comes in and produces output that makes sense. Yeah, so that's what you do when you go to ChatGPT. So it's really, this part here in the middle is called the large language model. It's just a statistical model. It just predicts output text based on input text. Yeah? And it feels like artificial intelligence because it feels like a real conversation. You feel like you talk to a person. You feel like you get real answers. Yeah, but you're actually not. You're just getting statistically probabilistic words, in a sequence that for you makes sense. And that's why you call this artificial intelligence. So if you think about this here, text in, large language model, do something, text out, that's really all there's to it. And it doesn't even matter that now we talk about large language models, it creates text. It could also create images. Text in, image out. Text in, video out. Text plus images in, images out. It's always the same. Yeah? So if you now think about a large language model, so like how does this thing here, like how does that actually work? Like how do you get there? Yeah. So what you do is, if you think about like huge set of documents, yeah, they all have text in this, and text is just like has grammatical structure. Like what I'm saying now, I'm just combining words in a way so you can understand. The words themselves have meanings. The combination of words has meanings. So like if you take a lot of text, it has intrinsically lots of logical connections or statistically measurable connections between them. Yeah? And when training a large language models on a very large set of data, all you really do is you uncover these relationships between words and sentences, that make up your large language model. That's why you say that's why we call them large, because they are trained with like very many documents, and the parameters that they in the end have for predicting output text are just very many, and therefore they're called large language models. And that's also the explanation. So you read all this stuff like ChatGPT versus Gemini versus Grok, then we have noch Mistral and all these, yeah. And it's really, because it takes obviously a lot of money to compile the data set for training a model. And training the model needs a lot of time and resources, and then having this model and doing something with it, that just, it costs a lot of money. That's why, creating large language models is really a big money game. That's why, you have these huge companies competing against each other. Yeah, so it's not something that like anyone can do. It's not really, it's an innovation as such. It's old proven technologies. We've just like arrived now at the time that we can actually use this to create these types of applications. All right, so that also answers the question, should you ever train your own model? No, you cannot. You simply don't have the capacity or the data to train it, nor the resources. Yeah, and even if you have the know-how, it's actually not so hard. Yeah, so you could, there are edge cases, you could train your own models. There are companies that do this for like very specific tasks. Yeah, so then you can actually do it. But like for the sake of this talk now, they're like, no, you cannot do it. So what you really want to do is you just want to use large language models that are provided by others. And there are many, because we have like this huge competition between different providers right now. Yeah? So a large language model generates text. So it's just a statistical software that generates grammatically correct text with a probability of making sense. Yeah? And this text is based on training data. So we saw that here earlier, right? Here, look. The text, what it can generate is based on the training data. So therefore, so the generated text is based on the training data. So therefore, when you think of it, yeah, you can think of a large language model as a software that can talk, but it can only talk about what it knows. So if the stuff that goes into the large language model does not contain what you ask it, it will not be able to give you an answer about this. Makes sense, or? Like, well, the simple thing, like what you don't know, you can't talk about. By the way, for humans, it's the same. Like if I ask you a question about something that you've never heard, you can't answer. Yeah, but if you've read it, you can answer. Same thing. All right, so I would like this, in case this is new to you, I don't know, I like this to stick, because that's really how you have to think about it. Okay, so now, what if what you want to talk about is not part of the training set? Well, the common thing is that you just like pass that information to the large language model. And the way this is usually done is that you pass two additional messages. You pass one message with instructions, like how you want this model to answer, and you just pass data. And here's your question. Yeah, so you ask a question, so it's similar saying like, given that I give you the instruction manual for this printer, please read it and then answer this question. Yeah, that's exactly, no, like here the instruction, read the manual and then answer questions asked. Here's the manual, and my question is, what does error 112 mean? Exactly the same process. Yeah, so if it's not in the data, you have to add that data, and this is usually done with passing two additional messages, instructions and the data. All right, we'll see how this works in practice in a minute by just looking at a demo. Let's do the demo right away. So what I did here for this demo, so I recorded it this morning, It runs on double speed, that's why it's a little bit fast. And you see here, that's the time that OpenAI takes to respond. So it takes quite some time if you use the API, so therefore I sped up the video. And what I did here for this case, so that's asking questions about the Drupal Splash Awards that took place last night. So obviously, OpenAI, ChatGPT doesn't know anything about what happened here last night. Maybe the website, actually the website data also not, because it's rather fresh and the cutoff date for the models from OpenAI, they're earlier. But if you pass in the text from the website and from the presentation as additional data, you can create conversations like this. You can create an AI bot that, gives like, first thing was I asked to list some of the winners. Then I asked, like, is there an AI project among the winners? Yes, there was. So here I'm asking, please tell me about this winner project. And then also I added this, I got this information just this morning from the jury. Why the jury, it was presented last night, but I had this text this morning, so I put this in. So why did the jury pick exactly this project? Put that in. And together with some instructions to the model, like how it should use this data, you can create these kind of chatbots. So first thing is what you need to think about. That's actually the first thing how you want to think about, like if you create your own applications, because you need to think about like what's the data that I want to talk about and what do I want to happen. Yeah, and that's how you do it. So you just combine these two things, and then you can actually create custom stuff. So this is running, we have a demo website, it's on ai.onexinternet.de. You can try it out there as well. So the data is in there, so you could take that. It requires that you make yourself an account. And the reason is because we limit the amount of requests you can make because it costs money. Yeah, so that's the reason. But if you go there, you can try this out. There's some more. I held like a similar presentation on DrupalCon, where we put the full DrupalCon session program in. It was really nice. You can then say, hey, what are the sessions regarding topic XYZ, and when is it starting, and in what room is it, and so forth. So you can make like really, really good stuff. All right, so let's look at the configuration. So the instructions, you remember two messages, instructions and data. So instructions were really simple. There's no prompt magic. So you hear this prompt engineering, oh, difficult. Actually, it's as simple as saying, oh, you're a friendly chat assistant. You talk about this event. Drupal talk about this event. So you will be passed a list of projects formatted as Markdown. Yeah. So when you pass data to a large language model, you want to have this structured, because the more structured it is, the easier it is for the model to just understand that data and respond correctly. So Markdown is like one way of how to pass data, because Markdown is such a simplified syntax. Yeah. So it says here you will get them projects as Markdown. Yeah, and then answer only on the information provided. Do not use other information. That's this hallucination that you hear about. Yeah, because it predicts text that makes sense. It's not thinking. Yeah, so if it sounds sensible to say something, that's what we call hallucination when an answer is like this. So like here with this information and the instructions, we try to prevent this. And then answer short and precise. Yeah, you can say funny or long or whatever. Yeah, and if you can't answer, then just point to the website. And format the responses as Markdown, because this chat UI that you just saw just gets Markdown back and renders it in a nice way, and then there's like this little typing effect there, and just shows that. So on the data that was provided looks like this. So what I took here, I went over the website, I copied all projects, converted HTML to Markdown, yeah, and put this into one long text, put in like who's the winner, for what categories are those, put in like for the winners, like the information from the jury, why this was chosen, and have this all in one big fat file. That's the second message. So these instructions plus this large file makes this application possible. All right, so here's a gotcha. So I didn't replace these screenshots, but the data is pretty similar. So you see, so you have, the amount of time it takes, well, let's go back, so otherwise you're distracted. So it takes time. If you pass in a lot of data to a model, obviously it takes a lot more time to process. Yeah, also little data, fast process, much data, slow process. Slow process, more computing time, costs more money, less efficient. Yeah, and so the text, all this text you combined was in total 77,000 characters, which is, if you calculate this to tokens, because large language models work based on tokens, it's 14,000 tokens. Yeah? So, and here for the next screen, I have the configuration screen for exactly the same application, just with data from DrupalCon. There was even more. It was over 20,000 tokens and was over 100,000 characters. So I didn't replace the screen, so please don't get confused that it says now for DrupalCon Barcelona, because I'm trying to illustrate here the point. So what is used to make this application possible? Exactly the same configuration. I was using here GPT for mini. So mini model means it's not so large as the large ones, because it doesn't have so much information. A large model knows everything about everything. A mini model can still talk, but it doesn't know so many things. It's just a smaller model. Yeah? So in this application, what we're doing here, I don't need the model to just know all the specific things about whatever. I actually only need the model to talk, because I'm giving it all the data that it needs to talk about. Yeah? So therefore, mini model is enough. Mini model is cheaper than like a large model. Yeah? So here you see, like that's how this was configured. It's using OpenAI mini model, just regular configuration here. So you can say when you talk to a large language model, like how much randomness you want to have in your answers, and so forth. And here, like that's how I have this. We can also look at this real later if you want to. So then we just pass in the static text. Yeah. So what you just saw was like the session information, and then here you see. There's two configurations that I put in. So number one, I had to set I set it for this application here only to 20,000 conversation tokens, because so the 20,000 tokens is 14,000 tokens was already the data that I'm sticking in, plus then the questions and the answer and the next question and the next answer and the next question. So it all piles up, because like when you interact like via a chat application, always the full conversation is sent to the model. New answers generated, that comes back. Yeah. Then all original data, all questions, all answers are then sent to the model. Yeah? And so therefore, you need to set this to a rather high number of tokens. Yeah? And you'll see on the next slide how expensive this can get. And yeah. So for this application, what you saw here, so what you probably want to do is like now, so we've limited here the maximum messages in the conversation to 10. So as soon as they're message number 11, we just cut it off. Because you don't need to know what I said 10 messages ago, yeah. So it's probably not relevant anymore. But it depends on your application. So it could be that it's good enough for 5, 6, 7 messages. Could also be that you need to have like a conversation that's like 20, 30 messages long. It really depends on the kind of application what you're building, yeah. But in this case here, probably after 5 questions, you are switching the topic, so you probably don't need the old ones anymore. But you would see that if you ask a question about the first one, it wouldn't know that anymore. All right. So if you just look at the calculation, now on the example of the data set I used for DrupalCon Barcelona was 21,000 tokens. Yeah. And you see that when you just assume, so here like the input cost, so like you pay for the tokens you send in, and you pay for the tokens that you get back. Yeah. And if you assume you have like an average conversation of 10 questions, then each conversation costs 4 cents. Meaning if 100 people, have a conversation, it already costs $4. And now if you think DrupalCon, where there's more than 1,000 people coming that might do this multiple times every day, so it can get really expensive. Yeah. So building an application by sticking the whole DrupalCon data in is just like very inefficient and very costly. Right? Therefore, you need to think of ways around this. And that's what I said when I earlier said we want to build dynamic applications. So what does that mean? It's actually not so hard to think about it. You just simply want to have this one here dynamic, because you only want to stick in the data that's relevant for the question, not the whole data. And that's what's called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. So when you hear the fancy term RAG, and people sound really smart, that's the only thing they mean. They only mean stick in the data that's needed, not everything. Yeah. So and also you need to have some kind of a process when you want to fetch this data. You need to have some smart engineering solutions of getting the right data. So that can be anything. That could be that you, for example, load based on your user ID, like your previous orders in a shop. That could be one. Or it could be that you just have a search engine, that finds something based on your question that could sound like it contains the correct answer. It doesn't matter what it is. It only means that you want to retrieve something before to augment your generation process. All right, let's look at this. 2 things that I want to point out before we go to the demo. So inside of a large language model, it doesn't have words inside. So the words get transformed into so-called embeddings. And embeddings are just like vectors of numbers. Yeah? And the reason, like in these relationships that we saw earlier in the large language models, they are just like a bunch of embeddings. You know, they contain like this information about the structure of the data in themselves. And you use embeddings because it's really efficient mathematically to just calculate the similarity between two embeddings. And that's done by thinking of this as, it's called vector similarity, because like in two-dimensional space, that's your vector, three-dimensional space, that's your vector, and then n-dimensional space, not enough visual thing here to show it, yeah? But mathematically speaking, you can really easily calculate the similarity, and that's like this. I mean, I did this in university many years ago already, so it's unchanged. So like if you do something like k nearest neighbors, like find 100 near things, and then you calculate the cosine similarity, that's how you find similar vectors in an n-dimensional vector space. Yeah, so this is how this works under the hood, and this is how semantic search works. So semantic search just takes the text that you put in, converts this to vectors, stores this in a vector database, and then you come and you ask a question that gets formatted into vectors in the same way, and then a vector search is run against the embeddings in the database, and the matching documents are returned that contain something that sounds like your question. Yeah? And the difference to, if you now want to compare it to the regular search that we all built, you know, with keyword search, you know, so if it doesn't say dog, if it doesn't say doggo in your text, you can search for doggo and it won't find, except you do like things like stemming or partial word search or n-gram or something like this, yeah? And in contrast, what like semantic search does, it catches, because it's trained on a model that understands like knows the relationship between words and sequences of words. It stores vectors, and you can find it on similarity. So it would allow you to match that these sentences, they're quite similar. You know, I forgot my phone in my house, great. And I left my mobile at home, damn. It means exactly the same thing, but not a single word is the same, except I. Yeah, so that you can discover with semantic search. So I'm not saying semantic search is always better. It depends on your application. Because if you want to build up dynamic applications, you need to consider how are you going to find the dynamic data, yeah? But like in case of conversational type applications, you want to use semantic search, and we're going to look at this now. So here's an example. This is on our intranet, and that works exactly like how I explained. So we take from our intranet, we have just indexed everything that is on the intranet as encoded as embeddings and stored this in a vector database, yeah, and now you can just actually interact via chat UI with a whole intranet, and it's pretty large because we try to, you know, write everything in a good way. So the first request was now here related to vacation holiday, like a typical thing that you would solve on intranet application. Yeah, so where there's holiday, then you also need to know like how does like travel reimbursement, how does that work, yeah? And the way this is formatted here, the way it's built here, you want to answer the question, but you also want to point the users to where they can read about it, because, you know, it's not about like taking everything away, it's about like providing easier access to the relevant information to people. Okay, now we're switching topic here. So think back like how this was with this 10 messages, yeah? So now that was a different message. So here would be like, you know, typical question, ID license, like where would you get that? So as you can see here, like ID and license, you find that on a bunch of pages. You know, there's some coding standards. Somebody talked about IDE and license there, yeah. So for the fun of it, I put in here, like we also have some no-goes, you know, that we just put on the intranet if developers are thinking about, you know, or typical questions, you know, we have those in here as well. Yeah, there's also a good one here. So we, of course, host many websites. Yeah, so here in this case, we have like listing pages where all the environments are listed where we host and stuff. So this is here, you can ask these kind of questions too. So it's really nice. So it solves like lots of efficiency problems when people want to access information and don't have to like go in and, you know, go to the list of projects, open the Drupal view, then filter in like what's the name of the client, and then like click on the link and then open the page where it says. So you just have this information directly available. So here, last example that I made for the demo is about like meeting culture. So we are many people, so this needs to be organized very well. So like all the stuff you find here, and yeah, it's really useful. All right, goes on a little bit longer, but I'm going to jump over now. So how is this configured? I think, did I put arrows here? Yes. So we're using here regular search API. Yeah, and for search API, you see here we have the regular search. Here's, you know, it's based on database for like a normal keyword-based search or lexical search. And here we've added like a new server, Milvus, that's an open source product for hosting embeddings. Yeah, and or a vector database it's called. Yeah, so that's this one here. And we have created a processor. Before we index the data, we just convert it to Markdown, because think of it like the HTML, of course, is huge. Yeah, so you want to like strip that all away because you want to make it as small as possible and small and precise as possible. So convert to Markdown. And then the only thing we index is actually quite simple. We just index the URL of the document, the title, and the URL twice. That's due to the mechanics. And then we just put the rendered Markdown in, convert this to embeddings, send it to Milvus, and then we can query. So the instructions you saw, or these are the instructions on our intranet. It's as simple as that. You're this assistant, you're friendly and professional, blah, blah, blah. So you get a bunch of messages back, because now you saw when I asked a question, in the response there were like 3 or 4 links sometimes. Yeah, because like there's many hits. So let's actually go look. Did I say this here? No, it comes later. It comes later. Yeah, so you get potentially many different documents back. Yeah, and like good way you need to tell in this data message, you need to tell to the language model how to separate the different documents. So a good way of doing this is to like, you know, use multiple quotes to separate them. So something really unlikely. Then here we want to have, you saw in the message, the link to the original documents. It was easier to tell the large language model that I want to have a link in this form, like what field to put into the text and what value to put into the source, yeah, and then just, you know, send the message back as Markdown. So what you need when you build such applications, you have to view your content, yeah, because like if you stick bad data in, you get bad answers, obviously. I was going to say in and out, yeah. So you need tools to just like see what does your content look like as Markdown. So we built ourselves here like a Markdown previewer where you can say for the different view modes, what does that look like in Markdown? Because you need that for debugging if you just like don't get the answers you expect. And yeah, and here's the configuration now for this search assistant. So the search assistant uses instead, we saw in the last screen, there was the text was just pasted in, the full text of like the Splash Award sessions was, or in this case, in the example, was like the DrupalCon sessions, but like for demo we saw was Splash Award sessions. In this case now, the source of the data is the vector database, and you want to get 5 results back, and they need to have a minimum vector similarity score of 0.2. Yeah, so here again, that depends on your application. So maybe your data is very disjunct, I don't know what the word is, like very, you know, then probably you don't want to have 5 results, maybe you only want to have 1 result or 2. Yeah, and depending on like how different your content is, maybe you want to have like a higher or lower minimum similarity in order to consider this as being a valid result for sticking into the data. Yeah, and here on the other side, everything's the same. Except you see here, this is now our intranet. It's 10 times larger than the data for DrupalCon sessions. Yeah, but we can just like have a total of only 4,000 tokens. Yeah, for a conversation is more than enough. Yeah, because like the way it's like working internally, puts in this content, what's there, answers the question, answer new question, new content, keep the other one if it's some space in the conversation left. Otherwise, kick it. Yeah, so much more efficient, and then you can actually operate the chatbot like that talks on much larger data set very efficiently, or more efficient. Oh yeah, there was an arrows. Yeah, these are the arrows. What you also need, if you build these kind of applications, you need logging. There's no way that you're going to make this work in a nice way if you just don't know that saying like, okay, this message was removed because there was already 10 messages here. This message was too long, so we cut something off. No, this one, that's what we sent to the large language model, and the large language model responded with this. So if you clicked here, you would see like the full thing. So something like this you need, and it's quite some work, yeah, but technically speaking, it's simple, like the magic lies in like how you build and configure your application. All right, so if you want to build something like this yourself, here are the modules used. It's in the presentation, you can see it later. You can build everything you saw here with modules that are available on Drupal.org. So we didn't, because it's happening at the same time while these modules are being created. We already needed that in projects and for ourselves. And plus we want to experiment ourselves with like, number of messages, number of tokens and so forth. Yeah, so therefore we didn't use all of them. So we didn't use here this one, the chat assistant API. That's the one that makes this vector stuff. And we also didn't use the chatbot. So like this chat application you saw there, which was kind of nice, has some bugs, yeah. But so we think that probably for the innovation aspect of like AI or conversational interfaces, there's going to be a lot of innovation in the UI part. So we want to experience here ourselves, like this ugly chatbot in the lower right corner. It's not going to be it. It's going to be something that maybe more something like what you saw, maybe Slack-like application that sits in the middle of the page, something like this it will probably be. So that's why we want to use your own, because we want to build this ourselves. And therefore and in order to what you just saw, like we have here some custom modules, just primarily for the case because they didn't exist. But most likely we are going to replace some of those with the ones that are available or contribute. But you can build this completely what we saw today. All right. To round up the picture, so what about fine-tuning? Maybe you've heard that before. So what is fine-tuning? So fine-tuning, so you can take a model and you can fine-tune it. Fine-tuning a model means you just add data to the model, you add like a layer around it with like some data that's yours, then you don't have to pass it along always as a message. That works if this data that you have is static. So for example, you have like your, from the printer, the instruction manuals, that just doesn't change. Instead of just like, finding it all the time and passing that data in, it's more efficient to just fine-tune the model by itself with this data. Then you don't need to send any data instructions and you can just like fire directly on the model. Yeah? If your data is changing all the time or gets updated all the time, you don't have enough time for fine-tuning, then it does not make sense. Yeah. So, and you just have a training set. It's all API based. You take a training set, you apply it to a model, that then you're fine-tuning layer, and then you talk to that one afterwards. It's as simple as that. Yeah. So, for customer support, that would make sense. Customer support, they always ask the same question: how do I do this and that? Yeah. So no need to like retrieve this dynamically. You can fine-tune this into your model of choice, and you can answer based on this. Yeah, or like for example, if you want to have a certain tonality, like want to pass some example documents how in this particular aspect of your application it should sound the response, that's something you would fine tune. Yeah. And of course token savings, because you don't pass data, is already trained in, and it's faster because of token savings. Quality goes up too. Yeah, so that's actually a use case for this. You can do this. All right, getting to the last one. It's creating useful applications. I'll go back to the slide with the barcode, like when we have the Q&A. So for useful applications, I saw this one on an AI conference, which struck me. So if you think about processes, like you use probably these applications in your daily work too. So there's some things where you go to ChatGPT, oh, make this text nice. Oh, make this to bullet points. Oh, make these bullet points to text. Yeah. So when you see a step in a workflow that AI can do, think about let it do it. Build software that makes exactly this. Or if it can simplify it, yeah, provide some helper tools. Otherwise, wait. So I thought this was a nice way of thinking about it, yeah, especially when you interact with groups of people that are trying to find stuff that they could use AI for, because maybe that's what your clients or whoever asked you to. So what's great, feels good, how can I use it? One thing we did not so long ago, doing exactly this, was an ideation workshop for like one of our clients, and we were actually in a group, a rather large group of more than 60 people, and we just put them together in groups of 5, and we just combined them, like designers, managers, developers, just random together, and we gave them exactly this application, what we saw earlier, where I just put in the data from the Splash Awards and made instructions, gave them each one of those, and they were just inventing some stuff. And they came up with really, really cool things, and things that I took here as examples. So for this client, they have the problem, there's multiple teams working. So like this, we're not the only software team working there, we're collaborating 30 developers, 10 stakeholders, and they have bosses too. And it's all Jira and epics and issues and whatnot, and we expect the client, check the board if you want to know what's going on. Of course they don't do it. You just stick this in, so they just experiment it, they just downloaded all the issues as CSV, put that in as is, that was a chatbot, and it could answer questions like, what's currently being worked on in the sprint? How far is it? Who's handling it? What's the focus of the sprint? Like all this stuff that they always want to know, that you can't see if you just know how to use the nifty, agile tools, but like you can automate this. So that was a really good one. Another one was a job agent. So from the company, they have like job, they have different departments, some are IT job portals and here and own job portals and whatever. So they just copied this all together, stuck this in, and then gave some nice instructions, and suddenly the agent could say like, oh, what jobs are available in this location? Or like, I want to work part-time, is that possible? If yes, where? That's actually pretty cool. And my favorite here, the handover assistant. So you probably have experienced this before. Colleague goes on vacation, they write like a long Word document, and that what could happen, what you should do, that you never read, except something happens. And you don't want to read the whole thing because you're only interested in what should I do when this happens, or who should I call? So you can perfectly solve this using an assistant. This was it. Questions? Yes, please.
So I think in the future, many of us want to use it, and of course many of us want to use the new experience builder. But in the experience builder, we do not have the old structure of content types and fields, but editors will be very free in how we create their content. So are these initiatives talking to each other? So for example, that you can mark a component in experience builder as do not render it in a certain view mode, so that you can have a view mode of content, which for example not includes sliders or advertising banners and so on, so that it is easier to convert this content to markdown with a sensible structure, so to say, to import it into the AI.
It's a very good question. I have not thought about this, but it's of course totally true what you say, because the nice thing that you saw here, take content view mode into markdown, and now comes experience builder. That's like a little bit a black box at the moment. Will this work nicely? I must say I don't know. So I'm involved in Drupal CMS for the search aspect. I'm actually the track lead for the search track, and but even I don't know exactly like what's coming there. It's also scheduled for late in 2025. So I think this question is super valid, but it's too early to ask. More? Yes, please.
Thanks for your talk, first of all. I have a question about the vector database.
Yes.
I built an AI agent outside of Drupal, which primarily uploaded PDFs and so on to answer questions. How does the vector database work? Is it upload as well, or does OpenAI connect to the servers for that?
So you need.
That's not.
No.
I can't.
So you use a large language model to convert text into vectors.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the same that you later send the questions to, because the questions you send, you just use the original text. So let's say I have a document here. I use this model to convert this into vectors, and I stick a string of vectors into the vector database. That's one document. Take another document, do the same. Now I have 2 strings in my vector database. Now comes the question that also gets converted to a vector, and then it searches through the database and says, oh, these 2 documents match. And then the original data is loaded, or in our case, we store it with it as contextual data, so we don't have to load it, and we send this data as text to OpenAI for answering the question. So we really do what's sent here to OpenAI is markup.
Yes.
So that's completely like this. This part here is completely separated from OpenAI. We just happen to use, a model from OpenAI for converting to embeddings.
Okay, maybe I need to say it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
What I try to figure out, and maybe it's not the place here, is if I have like 10 gigabytes of text documents reduced in Markdown. The processing isn't done before I send it to the model, is it?
The conversion to Markdown?
No, the vector processing is already done. So I have a vector database, I have every document in there, and it's, I don't know how much space.
So you search your vector database, you get this one document back that's relevant, or this part of the document that's relevant, and that's what you send to OpenAI.
Okay. So the processing is done before OpenAI.
Exactly. OpenAI only sees, let's imagine, it's the same as indexing PDFs in Solar. You take it, you convert it to text and put it in, and it gives you back information. If you split it in a smart way, if you know, like by chapters you want to separate your document or however you want to do it, then you get only this part back, and that's what you send.
Okay.
Yes, please?
I have a small question. The small question is just, I assume it's not very complicated. If the prompting within the AI module of Drupal is already there to not only print out text, but for example, to use it a little bit like use, and I don't know, have prepared, view modes, and for example, a website of, I don't know, apartments you want to run out, and I can ask a question, I get back, view modes fitting that I've already had prepared. So there on the screen right there, you say you print out generated text, but I guess you could also prompt it in a way where it doesn't print out text, but executes the code.
So you get something back. So if you, let's make the example, you just pass in 10 configurations, YAML files, and you say like, take this and convert this to YAML files in a sensible way. And then you get this YAML file, you could pass this to a controller that does something with that YAML file and execute something. You could totally do that. So you have with the Drupal AI module family, there's something called, I think it's called AI agents or something. And there you just have multiple, it's a pluggable system where you just hand one piece of data to the next agent that does something. And a use case like this could probably be solved there. I don't know how ready it is because it's a very specific use case, but I would assume that something is there because that's what they're working on for Drupal CMS, because they create UIs where they say make a taxonomy for colors and populate it with common colors, and then he actually makes that.
I'm sorry, but maybe also this already. I do maintain geolocation model.
Yeah.
Which does geo stuff.
Yes.
Including like geometry.
Yes.
So the question that I'm asking myself is, if you have, like, for example, a database of parks in Berlin, which is not that uncommon as a use case.
A database of what?
Of the parks.
The parks, yeah, okay, yeah.
The polygons,
Yep.
the parks,
Yes.
And you want to ask something like, give me all the playgrounds in parks in north of Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in the end, what you want is a geometric operation in the database, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
which is well defined.
Yeah.
So the question, I guess, is, can you use AI like that you ask a very broad question, and then the AI model picks up that this is stuff that has to be translated into this, and go on from there?
So it all depends on what data you put in and what you tell the AI to do with it. I once saw a demo where somebody just created an application that could that makes voice control for apps. Yeah. And what was done in the demo app, the app code contained the coordinates where something was on the page, and then the data said okay, you have these types of shapes, And if somebody says that's more a button and that's more an input field, and then if I say go to the input field, go to the first one or ask the question back if they're multiple. And if somebody says submit, then press the nearest button to where the last focus was. Yeah, and these were the instructions, and matching data was being sent. And then on the real life application, you could actually voice control it. That sounds a little bit similar, but I'm saying it because like you have data in a certain form, and somewhere in that data sits the information. Is there a playground there? Yes or no? Is it Northern Berlin or is it Southern Berlin? Yes or no? Yeah, so if you make that available in data and you explain like how to, and then in such a case the prompt gets really long. So for this application I just mentioned, it was a long prompt. You say like, look, north means if it's this, south means if it's that. Playground you find by this and that. Here are some examples. I ask the question and then I return this playground, yeah? And then boom, you feed in like from your geolocation search, you know, the playground, the data, and then it says, well, here are the parks with playgrounds in them.
And from your experience, could you already do something like this with the AI module, or are we not there yet?
What do you mean with do? Do you mean click it together in the UI, or? It's very specific, so they probably would need to make some plugins for like geolocation fields and so forth. Yeah, so I don't think I have not seen it, but who knows? I don't know. But if you code, yes, for sure, it's doable.
Is there like a plugin for prompt engineering that you can put it like as an adapter to give the instruction on how to operate on the database to give a response to the AI? Like, is there something like a module like that?
For optimizing the prompt, you mean?
To tell the AI basically how to access the database and to take the data out.
So if you wanted to create, let's say, an SQL query, yeah, then you just need to tell examples what kind of query do you want to have and pass a lot of similar data in on which SQL query that fulfills your needs would have to be constructed. Of course, it's possible. If it already exists as something UI-based, I don't know, probably not, I would say. Yes, it's too early, but like it's completely possible. That's how it works when you just generate, because it generates anything. You know, it just takes stuff that makes sense, and if you feed it things and say like, I need it to look like this, and this is these are examples of correct results. Please try to generate it from this input. Wait 1 second. Oh. Okay, thank you. There's nothing to close up, except I said thank you already. So thank you for listening, and yes, we can talk more.